with part of the word being occupation, I help people find jobs all day, but that's actually not at all the case what I do. An occupational therapist helps people be as independent as possible in their life. And you can work in a variety of settings. Some therapists work in schools, some work in nursing homes, some work in hospitals, some work in, let's see, group homes, some are wheelchair vendors, some make prosthetics, some work in businesses, so there's a bunch of different areas you can work in. When you go to school to become an occupational therapist, they kind of teach you about a bunch of different areas, and then after you graduate, you decide what area you want to work in, and then you can go back to school or get more training depending on what you want to do. Like some OTs work on hands all day, so if that's something that interests you. I obviously wasn't interested in that, so I didn't do that field, but what I have done since I graduated is work with kids in the school system from the time they're newborn babies until they're 21. And some of you may say, how did I even know what an OT was? My aunt is an occupational therapist. And so when I was a senior in high school, I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go to school. And they said, well, what do you want to do in life? And I said, I don't have any idea. But I went with my aunt and shadowed her for a couple days, and it looked fun. She didn't do the same thing every day, and she didn't sit in an office, so I thought, why not try it? So to become an OT, what you have to do is you go and get your bachelor's degree, and you can get it in like a variety of things, like psychology or biology or rehabilitative science or English. All you have to do is make sure you take the classes you need in order to get into occupational therapy school. So to become an occupational therapist, you need a master's degree. And it's kind of similar to being a student teacher, where you take a bunch of classes and then at the end you do kind of, they call it field work, like an internship for 6 months, where you follow an OT around and then you basically take over their job, and you kind of, it would be like you're a full-time teacher, but there's still a real teacher in the classroom kind of overseeing what you're doing for 6 months. And then after you're done with that, you take the boards to basically prove that everything you learned in school over the past 4 years you know, and then you only have to take it one time, kind of like doctors take the boards, or nurses take the boards, or dentists take the boards. So a lot of the healthcare fields you have to take the boards, and then every year you take continuing education classes. So basically you're staying current as to what people are doing out there, and you kind of keep improving your skills, because things that I might have learned 10 years ago, either they realized they didn't work, or doctors don't recommend doing them anymore, so we go get some training to get the new skills. So every day is a little bit different. I work with PTs, speech pathologists, vision consultants, assistive technologies. I have to call doctors, dietitians, and service coordinators in the schools. They're like social workers. So let's say a family can't pay their utility bill, we would call our service coordinator and say, can you help them? Or if their child's being discharged from the hospital and they have no place to live, a service coordinator would help them find an apartment and clothes and things like that. One of the questions I get asked a lot are, OTs, can guys be OTs? And they can be. Basically, whatever an OT does, a girl or a guy can do. A lot of times the male OTs tend to go towards the fields that are work hardening areas, which would be like a construction worker, and let's say they get injured on the job, and their employer, obviously they can't operate a crane anymore if they got hurt, but their employer says, as part of your job, you need to go to therapy, because in 3 months I want you to be able to come back and do this job again. So maybe a male OT would help them do some stretching of their arms, figure out how they can modify the crane so that he can still control it even if he doesn't have use of his arms. Some male OTs also help, have you guys ever heard of amputees? People that are like missing an arm or a leg or both. So a lot of males like to get in the prosthetic field, the male OTs, and help design those prosthetics, because especially you see it during the Paralympics, like after the Olympics they do the Paralympics, so they're for athletes that have some kind of disability. And so they'll design like a running prosthetic or even a jumping, and that's how an OT would be involved in the design. How do we make it fit so that it's still fast and simulates running, even though they don't have a real leg? So they work in a bunch of different fields. One question Ms. Krieger wanted me to cover was how much you guys make, like how much a therapist makes. And there's a range depending on what part of the country. Obviously, what part of the country do you think makes the most money? Does anybody know where it costs a lot of money to live? West Coast and the East Coast. So the therapists there are going to make more money because of the cost of living is more. And it also depends on what field you work in. I don't make a ton of money being an OT because I work in the schools, and so when you guys are out of school, I don't have to work. I don't have to work weekends, I don't have to work summers, I don't have to work Christmas break. But somebody that works in a hospital that's open every day, 24 hours a day, is gonna make a little bit more money, but they may have to work more hours. So I would say a beginning therapist probably makes about 50 or 60,000, and then you can make up to like 100,000 depending on if you go and get extra certifications, or if there's certain things that only you can do maybe in the city. Like there's a couple guys that make, have you guys ever seen, like, they call them ankle bracelets, like AFOs that kids use to help walk? Have you guys ever seen? They're like hard plastic, they almost look kind of like a boot, they go in a shoe. Okay, I bet you there's tons of people at school that have them, but you guys just don't know because their clothes cover them. But there's only 2 companies in Omaha that specialize, and so you have to basically get a mold. It's kind of like a cast of a kid's foot, and then the brace helps them walk. Either it has a hinge, so every time they step, the brace moves with them, or it kind of keeps their foot up because otherwise they may drag their foot, which means they fall, or their muscles get so tight, depending on how they stand, that eventually they get lower and lower that they can no longer walk, so they have to use a walker or, worst case, a wheelchair. So an OT may help make some of those braces so that they can at least keep walking. Let's see. I'm going to, so maybe you have a better idea kind of what I do in my day, because the last class was like, how would you even help work with a little baby? What would you do? So with any job, I'm sure you guys have heard this from the other, like even a pediatrician, a lot of part of their day is spent documenting. You have to document what you did. So every time I work with a student, or I go into a home to work with a baby, I write what I did, and then we give the parents ideas because we're not there every day. So I kind of say, this is what we did, and these are some ideas, and then I'll go back the following week and say, did you try my ideas? Did they work? Did they not work? What are some of the problems? And then we kind of help problem solve that. So yesterday I kind of had a busy day. The first kid I saw, his name was Ezra. And Ezra's about 1 year old, and they just moved here from Utah, and he's deaf and blind. And so, and he basically, the fact of being deaf and blind, he doesn't see anything. So to move, he doesn't care to move because he can't see any toys around him. So I worked with the PT in getting him in a stander so that he can start getting some weight in his joints, so then he can eventually hopefully walk. And then we tried some different toys that had textures on them, like a ball or sandpaper or those packaging bubbles and a balloon, to see if when he touched them, he kind of would be interested in that, and then would try to go for it again. And we also worked on, right now he gets all of his food through a button that goes into his stomach. So it's kind of like an IV, they just pump the food directly into his stomach. He doesn't have to take any food in his mouth. So the last thing we worked on is I had this spoon that lights up, and I put food on it hoping that the light would maybe get his attention and he would then try to get food, because I don't want him relying on this little tube in his stomach the rest of his life. Can you imagine like never putting any food or pop or water or juice or anything in your mouth? It's just, all goes in. Long term, we don't want him to have to rely on that button all the time. So that was Ezra. The second kid I saw was Dylan, and I work in OPS, so I work with some high school students, and he goes to North High, and he just got a job at High B. So he's really excited, except for he doesn't have a car, and he lives in a foster home, so he doesn't have a mom or dad to take him to work. So we practice riding the city bus. Have any of you guys ever been on the city bus? No, it doesn't really run in Papillion. But there's a lot of challenges that come with this city bus. First of all, it doesn't always come on time, and there's only room for one wheelchair, because when you go on a bus, you can't just put your wheelchair in there. You need these tie-down things that are basically hooks in the floor, so that if the bus stops quick, the tie-downs will keep the wheelchair from moving versus it rolling, obviously, all over the bus. So the first bus came, we were waiting outside in the cold. I don't know if you guys remember how cold it was yesterday. And there was already somebody with a wheelchair on the bus. So that meant we had to wait for the next bus, which, does anybody have any idea how long that would have taken? An hour, yes. So then the next bus came, we got on it, and then we had a transfer, so we had to go to Westroads, wait for the next bus, and then get there. And then he finally got closer to Hy-Vee, but the bus doesn't obviously take you right where you want to go. It takes you to the bus stop. So then on the sidewalk and across some busy streets, we eventually got to Hy-Vee, which took like 2 hours and 40 minutes. And then he was ready to start work. So the issue I had to help him problem solve is, could he figure out which bus route he needed to get on, how much money it costs, and now Dylan has to decide he's either going to be really late from work if he takes that bus, or he's going to be really early if he takes a different bus. Or the city has these little vans, it's called Moby, that can pick you up from your house and take you it's kind of like a taxi. Takes you exactly to where you want to go, but it costs more money, and you have to schedule it in advance. So Dylan is going to decide if maybe he finds somebody at work he knows that he can give some money to, talk to his boss to say, hey, can I start my shift later because the bus only runs at this time? And the bus that we took doesn't run on the weekends. So he's either not going to work weekends, or again, he's got to ask somebody else. If he asks somebody else for a ride, being in a wheelchair, that creates problems, because what do you think is going to happen if I just say, yeah, I don't think they even begin to do drugs. They can't hold things, they can't breathe. So who do you think is doing drugs? Mom. Exactly. So immediately, the first thing they do is they test the mom. She came positive. She's a really, really young mom. She's 17. And the mom was doing hardcore illegal drugs. So she went straight to jail. So now we have this baby that had to come home from the hospital and has no mom. We don't know where the dad is. So grandma said she would take the baby. Grandma's 75 years old. So imagine like some of your grandma and grandpas trying to raise a little baby. Scary. She doesn't know what to do with her. And Linnea was born with so many problems. She has oxygen all the time because she was born so early, her lungs aren't developed, and she also gets her food through her nose. And so all these machines are beeping. Grandma doesn't know what to do. Grandma's like freaked out. And grandma's from a Native American reservation. She doesn't speak English. So she has this baby, but is really scared. So we explained to her how to do the tube feedings. We explained to her how long Linnea should be sleeping in her crib. We explained to her how she should put her in her high chair and different things like that, because otherwise Linnea is at risk for never developing some new skills, and then what will happen is she'll basically not be able to do much at school if we don't start helping her early. So grandma was really grateful of that. And then the last girl, I went to a school. Her name's Destiny. She's in 2nd grade. She just started the school this year. She's from Mexico. And her mom got an infection when she was pregnant with Destiny. And something affected her bloodstream that when Destiny was born, basically her feet turn inward and her knees are locked. So she walks like that. So obviously trying to bend over and get something is almost impossible because your knees are locked. And she doesn't have bones in her lower arms, like from her elbow here, so it's like almost like her wrist is right here at her elbow. So she's like this. So when she writes, she uses both hands to hold the pencil and writes. I mean, it just takes her a long time to do everything, but that's all she knows. So she's just kind of adapted a lot of things to make it independent for herself. But they have at her school lockers, and she doesn't have a locker because she can't open a locker. She can't lift her arm far enough, it's too high. And she basically put her stuff like kind of in a crate in the classroom, just threw it all in there. And she was sick of doing that because everybody else got to go out and get their coat from their locker, and it's kind of a cool thing when you're in 2nd grade that you get a locker. So I worked with her on modifying her locker. We added a rope through the hole, and I took off the locking mechanism and then added a shower hook. So she can just kind of pull it down, and then she just kind of shoves her body into it to close. But she can use her locker like everybody else. So she no longer has to use this crate in the room that everybody knows is Destiny's. The other issue that she was having yesterday that she wanted my help on is getting on her coat. There's a para that puts on her coat every day, but the para has lunch, so by the time she comes to help her, she's like 10 minutes late, and she only gets recess for 20 minutes. So by the time she gets on her coat, her class is coming inside. So we worked in the nurse's office, and I taught her some different ways to get on her coat, keeping it zipped, sticking her legs in, and just, I put some Velcro loops so she can just kind of pull it up using her wrists, and then she can go, you know, and I put something on her zipper so that she can pull it up. So she's excited. She can do her coat by herself. She doesn't need Paris help, and then she gets to go to recess the whole time with her friends. So that's what I did yesterday. Those are the 5 kids I saw. So as you can tell, each hour of my day is different. I get to work with different kids with all different types of disabilities. Do you guys have any questions about any of those kids or anything? A lot of times when we go into the homes, the physical therapist comes with, and maybe the physical therapist is working on like positioning, how to hold them and carry them, and then I'm working on using their hands and eyes together. We have teachers who also come with us, and so they're working on like their talking and their thinking skills, like putting puzzles together. So a lot of times in the homes, there's never just one of us. And the other issue about going into the homes in OPS is they speak a lot of languages. I think there's 17 different languages that some of our babies speak. So that means when they speak different languages, they come from different cultures. So in some other cultures where they come from, it's normal to carry your baby around in like a sack till they're 2 years old. Well, obviously in the US we don't do that, and we're concerned if they've been, you know, attached to their mom for 2 years. So we kind of talk to them about things that they should be doing at certain ages, but also respecting the culture differences. Like some cultures, they don't sit at the kitchen table, they eat on the floor, and they eat with their fingers only. So explaining that's fine. When they get to school, we're gonna have to eat with utensils. So kind of starting to work on that. And Destiny, actually, she was taught because they didn't think she'd ever be able to move her hands much. She's actually pretty amazing. She actually eats with, she holds a spoon in between her big toe on her left foot and just bends over. And it's, so I know that, I'm used to that, but like people that don't see that in the lunchroom, it creeps them out because they're like, what is that girl? But she's independent versus she didn't want somebody feeding her herself, you know, because she said, now I get to pick what I want to eat. So we have this plate that swivels. And so then she just, as it comes around, she just scoops it with her foot. So imagine how long it would take you to eat. If you had to first curl your toes such that your foot, I mean, it helps that her foot's already turned in to then be able to eat. I mean, be a slow eater. So that's kind of what an OT does.